Destiny 2's next expansion, Renegades, doesn't come out until December, but it's set to be revealed on September 9th. Today I'm going to take a look at everything we know about Renegades, and then make predictions about how its story will unfold. Spoiler warning for The Edge of Fate and Star Wars. When The Edge of Fate was revealed in May, a 30-second teaser trailer released for Renegades. The teaser trailer doesn't reveal much in the way of story, but it does show off the main conceit of Renegades. This is going to be an expansion inspired by Star Wars. The teaser begins with the bodies of deceased soldiers on what looks like the floor of a ship, and then pans to show 3 guardians, one of each class, 2 of whom are holding blaster pistols, and a third of which is holding a green lightsaber. The teaser ends with a wide shot of speeders driving across a desert, with a red sun in the background, and a building with architecture that's reminiscent of Tatooine. All throughout, music and sound effects reminiscent of Star Wars are played. Text on the bottom of the screen at the end reveals that Bungie has a license with Lucasfilm to use designs from Star Wars for Renegades. This reveal spawned some discourse, largely from the fact that the only things that were shown were all Star Wars inspired. Assistant game director Robbie Stevens made a statement on Twitter after the reveal, saying, "Rest assured, Guardians. Everything in Renegades is in canon for the Destiny universe, but we're leaning into the aesthetic, tone, and vibe of Star Wars to tell a Destiny story with Destiny characters. This confirms that Renegades will be part of the Fate Saga's overarching narrative, and that we won't have Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader show up and steal the show. I'm not interested in litigating the Star Wars aspect here, but I do still have some reservations about the idea. However, I don't think I know enough about the expansion yet to form a nuanced opinion on it. It's unclear what level of influence Star Wars will have on the expansion, but at this point it seems clear it will at the very least be a heavy influence on the art direction, aesthetics, and music. I take what is said in marketing regarding Destiny taking influence from a specific genre with a grain of salt, because we've seen many different iterations of this, and it tends to be overemphasized in marketing compared to the actual impact in the game. There's a gradient of influence from pretty influential to barely impactful at all. For example, Lightfall leans pretty heavily into the 80s action movie theming at points in terms of art direction, music, editing, and even writing. On the other end of the spectrum, Witch Queen was marketed as a detective mystery, but doesn't feel like that at all. I can kind of see where that marketing line came from, as it's a story where mystery drives the plot forward, but it doesn't feel like a detective story at all. We also recently had episode Revenant, which was supposed to be Vampire Slayer themed, but it pretty much didn't feel like that at all aside from some of the art direction. Given that Bungie paid for a Star Wars license, I'm guessing they will make full use of it, and Renegades will be closer to Lightfall, or perhaps surpass it in terms of how heavy the influence is. After the reveal, a brief description of Renegades' story was added to Destiny 2's timeline. It reads, "Dive into the criminal underworld and take down an evil empire. Venture into a lawless frontier and reveal deeper mysteries about a new dredgen in Seoul. Build your power, credits, and notoriety." This gives us a starting point for understanding Renegades' story. It will lean into the seedy underbelly of Star Wars that characters like Han Solo or Greedo occupy in the original trilogy. At the same time, we will be facing an evil empire, which will obviously make reference to Star Wars' iconic fascist imperial empire. The criminal underground aspect is a good fit for Destiny, as the narrative has played with similar aesthetics and tone in previous stories, like Forsaken, which is about getting revenge against escaped criminals in the Reef, and Season of the Drifter, which focuses on the Dredgens. Renegades appears to be repeating the themes of both Forsaken and Season of the Drifter by introducing a new Dredgen antagonist. The evil empire is a bit more puzzling to me. Star Wars' empire works well because it's a political juggernaut. It has ruled the galaxy for decades in 1977's Star Wars, and the protagonists are part of an armed resistance at the beginning of an open war with the Empire. In Destiny, the Sol system is governed by a coalition of factions that have cooperated in the face of existential threats, with some pockets of hostile resistance. With the death of the Witness, there isn't a player in the system with a level of influence compared to Star Wars' Empire. The closest we've seen to a Star Wars-style evil empire in Destiny is the Red War, where invading Cabal forces take over the system, forcing humanity to organize a ragtag resistance. We've already done a story like that, so I'm not sure what new ideas Renegades will bring to the table to justify this aspect. The Edge of Fate released with portal datapads that tease Renegades and reveal more information about its narrative setup. These datapads are collected into the As Without lorebook. One specific entry called Treacherous Contacts gives the biggest hint at Renegades' plot. It's a series of messages from an agent of the Praxic Order, likely Honor, as they investigate Cabal activity on Mars. I'm going to read excerpts and then explain how it will likely impact Renegades' story. Normally, I wouldn't get out of bed to track Cabal activity, but the Hidden are reporting a new sect at work on Mars. Their livery and weapons are fresh, and they're doing brisk trade with the local gangs. According to Omar St. Croix, this new faction of Cabal are big players in the Martian arms trade. They have guns and armor for sale beyond the usual refurbished Red Legion junk. Someone out there with real manufacturing clout is behind them. Nobody stockpiles this much gear without hedging against Guardian interference. They'll want paracausal weapons sooner or later. This hints that we will see a new sect of Cabal, distinct from the Red Legion, Kaido's Cabal, or the Shadow Legion. They are involved in the Martian arms trade, which sounds like it will serve as the expansion's criminal underground. It's hinted that the Cabal have a powerful backer, who is likely the Dredgen. The next excerpt tells us about the emergent sect's actions. A hit squad wearing their livery mugged Xur in the Winding Cove, cased him up until all the Guardians left, then gave him the old Dark Age stick-up. Here's the inventory of everything stolen from Xur. 1 bad juju, 1 malfeasance, 1 ruinous effigy, 1 flight records. Left all the strange coins, glimmer, and standard gear. Clearly knew what they were after. After reviewing the Xur case file, something sticks out. The flight data. They didn't just want the weapons. They wanted to know where he got them. They wanted his contacts. Looking back, that might have been the real target all along. Intercepted comms from an unidentified Cabal ship included references to Xur's dominion and eternity. The message repeats 9 times. Somebody's trying to make contact. This provides us with a connection to the Edge of Fate and the broader Fate saga, which is focused on the Nine. This Cabal faction wants to forge some kind of connection with the Nine, so they attack Xur to acquire some weapons of sorrow, likely for the Dredgen, and find out how to get in contact with the Nine. The entry continues. I think the Renegade Cabal are making headway. Our undercovers on Mars report their lieutenants out trading for samples of periodic elements, most of them benign. Tungsten, iodine, ytterbium, neodymium, the list goes on, and not in quantities useful for manufacturing either. I put out feelers with the fallen mob in Tharsis. Rumor is the Cabal have their Scion engineers building a cipher device using periodic elements as its key. Not the words for the elements, but the elements themselves. They have to be getting outside help, and I mean way outside. The Hidden Listening Post on Mars reports a spike in local comms traffic. Whatever the Cabal were hoping to gain from Xur's flight records and their elemental cipher, it seems to have worked. We still don't know who's backing the Martian faction, but they've got big plans. This section explicitly uses the word renegade, heavily implying that this new faction will be the evil empire we face in Renegades. This makes a lot of sense because the Cabal are the closest Destiny analog for stormtroopers, and they are part of an interplanetary empire. Although this empire has splintered into various factions, following the coup against Callus and Gaul's failed invasion of the Sol system in the Red War. Their capital Torabottle also recently fell to Xivu Arath's hive. The Dredgen would then be an analog for a Sith Lord, someone who uses the forces of darkness for nefarious ends. This section also expands upon the connection to the Nine, implying that the Cabal faction has successfully made contact with and secured some kind of deal with the Nine. It's unclear what purpose the cipher using periodic elements would serve, but obscure elements are a repeating motif in stories related to the Nine, and they often discuss them or give their emissaries visions of them, likely because of their unfamiliarity with traditional elemental matter due to being made of dark matter. What purpose these elements serve is unclear, but it seems like they're using them to construct messages, perhaps at the direction of the Nine. I have a theory for what this could be in service of, but I'm going to save that for the big prediction section of the video. The entry concludes by mentioning Drifter. Our agents have been making indirect inquiries to the other gangs in Tharsis. Word is the Cabal are looking for the Drifter, and more specifically the Derelict. I get the feeling Drifter stepped in something rancid, and he's about to track it all over our carpet. Where is that scumbag? Mars will almost certainly be the desert planet resembling Tatooine from the teaser based on this entry. The expansion will likely take place in a new patrol zone somewhere near the Destiny 1 Martian patrol zone, given that Tharsis is mentioned. What exactly the Dredgen and Cabal have planned for the Drifter and his Derelict, and likely his haul, is unclear, but this connects them very explicitly to the ending of The Edge of Fate, where Drifter drops the haul into the singularity at the center of Three's corpse to temporarily reanimate them in order to deliver their dying message to humanity. 3 makes a prophecy of extinction, saying that their death will lead to the deaths of all life if the Guardian cannot bind the Nine. Afterwards, Drifter has been changed, aged by flying close to the singularity, and calls himself Nine-Touched. The hull also returns to Drifter's ship, like it never left. Now that I've covered everything we know, it's time to talk predictions. With each prediction, I will give a confidence rating, based on how likely I think it is to come true. Prediction 1. The main plot will begin with an opening crawl like Star Wars that recaps The Edge of Fate and explains the Cabal activity on Mars. It will explain that this new Renegade Cabal faction is trying to establish a new Cabal empire, and that they're working with the Dredgen, who is trying to amass darkness power. The opening crawl will then fade to a shot of space, which will pan down to a space battle in the orbit of a planet, likely Mars, as a visual homage to the beginning of Star Wars. I think this will be done to give Star Wars flavor to the opening cutscene. I'm pretty sure they're going to do this with 8 out of 10 confidence. Pretty much every Star Wars parody or homage does this. Prediction 2. This new Cabal faction will be called the White Legion. The colors used in each Cabal faction tend to be their defining feature, as the previous factions we've seen are the Red Legion, Shadow Legion, which is black, and Keitel's Cabal typically wear blue. Stormtroopers wear white armor, so white makes the most sense. The faction could be named something else, but the armor will almost certainly be white. I give this idea a 3 out of 10. Prediction 3. Otzot and Urix will be involved in the story. If you're unfamiliar, Otzot and Urix are two of the most prominent enemy scions in the Sol system, and are both still at large. Otzot is known for being part of the coup to exile Callus, and having rebuilt the famous Oxa machine during Callus's reign. Urix is the current commander of the Shadow Legion after Callus's death. I believe that Otzot will become part of the new faction, and serve as one of its leaders alongside the Dredgen. Urix, on the other hand, controls the Shadow Legion, so I think it's less likely for her to be part of the new faction. But I think it would be interesting to have the Shadow Legion show up and be caught up in the inevitable power struggle between this new faction and Keitel's cabal. Otzot has largely been a background figure, but was referenced in post-campaign content for the final shape, which I think is setting up her appearance in Renegades. I would place this at 6 out of 10 confidence, as it's very logical but by no means a slam dunk. Prediction 4. The new faction will attempt to rebuild the Oxa machine, and likely succeed. When I thought of this idea, it fit the Fate Saga's central themes of prophecy and fate too perfectly to disregard. The Oxa machine is said to be clairvoyant and pass information from ancient civilizations into the present. If the Oxa machine is involved, we will likely get another prophecy about the future, likely a more specific version of 3's prophecy of extinction. This could be what the new Empire wants the Nine's power for, and why they're building the Elemental Cipher. This would also be a good time to explore the origins and nature of the Oxa machine more thoroughly. It's an idea that's been floating around in the background since Vanilla Destiny 2 that I don't think has gotten fleshed out as much as it deserves. There's the theory that it's connected to Teox, given the alternate spelling of Oxta, which could also connect to the Dredgen, given that Dredgens and the Weapons of Sorrow are strongly influenced by the Hive. This is probably my most out there prediction, so I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. Prediction 5. The Dredgen will attack Drifter's derelict and steal the Hall, which will kickstart the plot of the expansion. This could even be the opening space battle after the crawl, which would serve as a pretty big inciting incident for the expansion. We know the Hall is immensely powerful and contains a portal to unknown space, so it falling into enemy hands would be catastrophic. It also would tie Renegades' story directly into the conclusion of the Edge of Fate. I'm very confident in this given the mention of Drifter and the derelict in the lore. 9 out of 10. Prediction 6. I also think Urix's Shadow Legion will fly pyramid ships and be involved in a space battle over Mars at some point in the expansion. Either that or the new faction will steal a pyramid ship. Think about it. Star Destroyers are famously triangular, and their silhouette is very iconic in the cinematography of Star Wars space battles. The homage writes itself. I'll give this a 6 out of 10. Prediction 7. There will be a Cerberus Vey 3 reference. This one isn't super important, but given that the expansion will focus on a war with the Cabal on Mars, referencing Destiny's most famous opening strike dialogue seems inevitable. Whether we wanted it or not, we've stepped into a war with the Cabal on Mars. This most likely would just be something mentioned in a lore tab as a wink and nod, because the writers like to do that sometimes, but I could see it being an Easter egg or throwaway line in the main narrative. I give this a 7 out of 10. Prediction 8. The Dredgen will be the final boss of the expansion and will wield a red lightsaber. Fighting the equivalent of a Sith Lord and a human darkness user would be interesting. Destiny doesn't usually feature story bosses that are human, but I've always thought that facing a Dark Guardian in combat would be cool. It also would fit the Star Wars theme well. I give this a 6 out of 10. Prediction 9. The lightsaber will be an exotic you get during the main story, and the blaster pistol will be the season pass exotic. I think we will get the lightsaber during the campaign to enable a lightsaber duel with the Dredgen during the final mission. It's too tantalizing a possibility for Bungie to ignore. I give this a 7 out of 10. Prediction 10. The evil empire will completely take control of Mars from Keitel's cabal at the beginning of the story, and possibly another planet or moon. I think this is necessary to establish the faction as a threat that feels like an empire versus a ragtag group of renegades. The enemy faction just wouldn't feel Star Wars enough if this doesn't happen, so I'm willing to give it an 8 out of 10. Prediction 11. The evil empire will try to establish their power over Sol by creating a doomsday weapon capable of destroying entire planets or killing members of the Nine. This would be Renegades' equivalent of the Death Star. I could see the new faction converting Mars's moon Phobos, which historically has been a Cabal base, into the doomsday weapon using the Hull. This would give the expansion big stakes, because we know that 3's death is very bad for the life of Sol, so losing 4 would be even worse. There also are people and Cabal on Mars. I don't think the evil empire will actually successfully destroy a planet, but I could see them testing it by destroying an asteroid or something. This weapon would be destroyed by the Guardian in the climax, like Luke Skywalker's Death Star run. I'm less confident about this idea, so I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Prediction 12. The primary allied characters for Renegades will be Drifter, Keitel, Saladin, and Zavala. Drifter we know for sure will be involved because the new Cabal faction is searching for him specifically. Keitel and Saladin are the two primary leaders of the allied Cabal, so it makes sense that we would work with them to fight new Cabal threats. Zavala also tends to be involved heavily in the Cabal storyline because he negotiated the alliance with Keitel. I'm extremely confident in this to the point where I would give it a 9 out of 10. I could also see Failsafe making an appearance as the C-3PO analog, perhaps in the body of an Exo, but I think this is substantially less likely. Prediction 13. There will be a major character death. The first option is that Zavala will be injured or die in this expansion, causing him to no longer be Vanguard Commander, leading to Ikora stepping up, fulfilling the Edge of Fate prophecy where she becomes Vanguard Commander. I see this happening in one of two ways. Number 1, Zavala serves as the Obi-Wan Kenobi figure of this expansion, mentoring the Guardian. The Dredgen then could be a student who worked under Zavala at some point, but fell to the darkness, mirroring the Vader and Obi-Wan relationship. Then the Dredgen would kill Zavala in a duel like Obi-Wan dies in Star Wars. Number 2 would be that Zavala sacrifices himself to save Keitel from an assassination attempt to preserve the alliance with humanity. The second option is that Drifter could serve as the Obi-Wan analog and have a pre-existing relationship with the new Dredgen. He would then lose his ghost and possibly die in a duel with the new Dredgen like Obi-Wan does. Drifter is newly aged given his approach to the singularity in the Edge of Fate, so he looks kind of like Obi-Wan. I think Zavala dying is far more likely though, as he was recently recast due to Lance Reddick's passing and also doesn't have a ghost anymore. I give Zavala a 5 out of 10 and Drifter a 2 out of 10. Prediction 14. The evil empire will be allied with one of the outer orbits, most likely 5 or 6. They will try to manipulate the Dredgen into serving their agenda and exerting control over the Sol system so that they can work towards their goals of severing their connection to matter life. 5 specifically talks in the lore a lot about converting Jupiter into a black hole, so I could see that being something they want to use the Doomsday weapon for. This is also less certain, so I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Prediction 15. We know Renegades will launch with a dungeon. I'm extremely confident that it will be Cabal themed given the expansion story. We also haven't had a Cabal dungeon appearance since Duality over 3 years ago. That was 5 dungeons ago, and we've only had 10 total. Bungie likes to have a raid and dungeon for every enemy faction, and we haven't had a Shadow Legion themed dungeon yet, so I think a Shadow Legion operation to steal something from the new Cabal at the direction of Urix would make for an interesting dungeon story. Perhaps they would be trying to take control of the Oxa machine for themselves. The Dread could serve as a support faction because many of them have been closely allied with the Shadow Legion in the past. If it's not the Shadow Legion, I would guess it would be the new Cabal faction, but I think that's less likely because Bungie tends to make the Raider dungeon a different faction than the main campaign boss. I successfully predicted that Spire of the Watcher would be Vex, Warlord's Ruin would be Scorn, and Sunder Doctrine would be Dread, based on this kind of analysis. I'm also calling my shot extremely early that the Alchemist dungeon in 2026 will be Vex themed, since they haven't appeared in a dungeon since Spire of the Watcher, and the lore heavily implies that the Alchemist will be about the Conductor. I've been on a generational run with my dungeon predictions over the last several years, so I'm willing to give it an 8 out of 10. That's all of my storyline predictions. Let me know what you think of them in the comments. Do you agree with them or disagree? I also would be interested to hear your predictions for Renegades. This video was funded in part by my channel members. You can click the join button to gain access to exclusive perks like monthly bonus videos, your name in the credits, and more. Thank you to everyone for watching.